Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, I have an update for you on Monday's main story on Carson Hocevar and his comments about Mexico. I'll just say a lot has transpired in the last 24 hours. Sticking with Mexico and issues south of the border, Joey Logano made some interesting comments yesterday during his appearance on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio about his trip, including what he did and didn't do and how he was happy about his decisions because other drivers paid the price for their choices. We'll also talk about some remarks from Richard Petty on the playoff format, SVG, and road courses. And we'll have some related comments from Mark Martin on the playoff system and a poll he ran, as well as a poll that I ran yesterday and how the results are similar. Continuing with numbers, we'll talk about the latest TV ratings this week, how they compare to last week and the 4 weeks of prime and the overall season. And we'll wrap up with more numbers in our By the Numbers segment. However, before we start crunching those numbers, let's go back to the big news from late yesterday. And that was Spire Motorsports announcing that they were issuing the following disciplinary measures to Hocevar, including a $50,000 fine, which will be donated in equal portions to 3 organizations that serve Mexican communities, and mandatory cultural sensitivity and bias awareness training. The team said these actions are consistent with their core values of respect, which is something we proudly display on every race car, team uniform, trackside hauler, and digital channel. Respect is not a slogan. It is a daily expectation that we walk the walk in how we speak, compete, and serve the communities that welcome our sport. To which Carson replied with a statement of his own saying, quote, "Whoa, everybody, the truth is the truth. I said something that not only was wrong, I said it without even laying my own 2 eyes on CDMX and turning 1 lap in an actual race at an amazing facility that welcomed me with open arms, and I go and say that? Thank you for the support, but I'm not sure we're on the same page. You guys want me to be me. It was me who said it, and it was me who apologized after actually taking the time to explore the city and feel the passion of every fan in attendance. I appreciate the opportunity to learn, and I knew before this weekend what respect means to this organization, and I didn't meet the standard, so I got what I deserved. I hate learning these lessons in the public eye and bringing any negative attention to Spire or me. We've been fast just about every week, and I'm sure I have plenty of mistakes left in me. I appreciate growing up in front of all of you, and you guys get to see the good and the bad. I'm just me. I'm trying. It just doesn't always go the way I want, and I bring a lot of this on myself. However, I love being in this garage with this team surrounded by the best drivers and fans in the world. See you in Pocono." So it was interesting to see Spire's decision, which they also noted in their initial letter. The NASCAR confirmed that the team-imposed discipline satisfies the sanctioning body's requirements. And as I said on Monday following Hocevar's initial response, I appreciate what he said and take him at his word. I have no reason not to. In this latest response, he's clearly addressing those who don't believe him and not being, quote, on the same page, end quote. Now, I know there will be some of you who still question him and suggest he's being forced to say that, but I ask you to ask yourself this. How many dumb things did you say or do when you were 22? That's what we're talking about here. Carson is 22. The only difference, we weren't public figures and it wasn't in the public eye, more specifically on a social media platform that didn't exist. So I believe him, and I know he's going to continue to learn and grow as a person and a race car driver, and I look forward to watching him grow in his journey. Moving on from Hocevar, but sticking with the theme of Mexico. And I was listening to Joey Logano yesterday on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio on his Behind the Wheel segment when he talked about his trip south of the border and said this.
I'm like the nervous traveler, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't leave the country very often. So when I do, I'm nervous I'm going to lose my passport. I'm nervous I'm going to get sick. I'm nervous I'm going to get kidnapped. Like, I'm thinking of all the worst possible scenarios in the world. Right? Yeah. It was fine down there. Okay, but I'm like, I'm not leaving this hotel. I'm like, nope. I'm going from hotel to racetrack to hotel. This is the place that NASCAR trusts us to be. I feel like this is where I should be. They had like 3 different restaurants in there. Tried them all. All of them are great. And I didn't get sick. All I know is there was like 5 drivers on race day that were not feeling so hot. And I was like, I did the right thing. I'm still feeling okay. So it all worked out.
Now, if I'm being honest, when I went back in September, I had no fear of being kidnapped. I had no fear of losing my passport, but I was fearful of getting sick, which I did. So I found it interesting hearing Logano saying that not only did SVG, as we all knew, got sick, but apparently multiple other drivers did as well. I can tell you again from my own personal experience, it is not something fun. And I know that my experience didn't just last for a couple of days. It actually lasted for almost a month. So I wish those who suffer down in Mexico continued healing in the coming days and weeks. Moving on to our next story, but sticking with SVG, sort of. On Monday, Richard Petty shared a comment on X that a fan had asked him on Facebook how he felt about a driver 30th in points automatically qualifying for the championship just because he can win on a road course, obviously referring to SVG winning the day before in Mexico. Listen to what the King had to say.
The way they got this thing fixed, if you win and you're in, that can't be right. From the standpoint that you got somebody, like say, that's 30th in the points that's going to make the playoffs. Hey, man, what happened to the guy that's 15th or 16th or 18th? Been running good, finished good everywhere. You're making a championship situation by winning a road course, which is not really NASCAR to begin with. So from that standpoint, I think they're going to have to jockey around and change some of this kind of stuff.
First, let's tackle his remarks on road courses not really being NASCAR to begin with. According to NASCAR's own record, its second sanctioned race during the inaugural 1949 season was run on a road course, the 4.15-mile circuit right on Daytona Beach. But then, 9 years later in 1958, the Cup Series raced at Riverside and did so until 1988. So road courses have been part of the sport since the very beginning. Okay, now to his point about the playoff system. And his remarks about finishing good everywhere are clearly a nod to a full season points battle for the championship, which takes me to a post Monday on X by the Scene Vault podcast, asking whether fans preferred a championship decided by a full season or playoffs. The response was overwhelmingly in favor of the season point system at 80%. Mark Martin responded to that particular post with his own similar poll and similar results. His poll had more than 21,000 respondents and showed 60% wanted a Classic 36 race season versus 23% wanting a 10 race chase, 10% wanting something else, and 7% wanting the current playoff system. So I decided to join the poll party yesterday and posted one on my channel using wording similar to Martin's. Obviously, it didn't get the same numbers as Martin's, but the results were familiar. 67% wanted a Classic 36 race season, 19% wanted a modified playoff system, which I put as 10 races and the last 3 races determining the winner. 9% preferred something else, and 5% liked the current playoff system. First of all, thank you to those who participated. And second, it's clear that my poll, Martin's poll, and the Scene Vault podcast poll show fans favor the 36 race season schedule. But Martin's comments also show why it's not likely to go back to that format. Problem is, decision makers don't care what the fans want. It's all about what broadcast partners want. I'm sorry, but I can't win this battle for our great fans. It's extremely frustrating to me. While that may sound discouraging, I'll offer you this. NASCAR has said this year that there is a playoff committee in place, which I remember talking about at COTA in March, which Christopher Bell is a part of. And they are considering modifying the playoff system in some fashion. Obviously not for this year, but potentially in 2026. So it's not going back to the full season championship, but it is likely to change somewhat. Moving on to our next item, and I just wanted to talk about a story I read yesterday on thehill.com, which showed that streaming viewership has officially overtaken cable and broadcast. For the first time ever, it said viewership on streaming platforms topped cable and broadcast channels combined last month, underscoring a growing trend across the media business. In recent months, streaming platforms accounted for 44.8% of all viewership in May, according to new data from Nielsen Media, compared to 24.1% viewers who watch cable and 20.1% who watch broadcast television. Interestingly, YouTube accounted for the largest share of audience of any streamer, notching more than 12% of total audience share. So thank you guys for watching YouTube. Which leads to our next item, and that is the TV ratings for this week's race at Mexico City. If you'll recall, last week's numbers were 1.77 million at Michigan, and I said I'd be curious to see if there was a bump because it was the first time race in Mexico. Well, there was an increase as 2.1 million viewers tuned in for Sunday's race in Mexico City. You can see it's the second highest rated broadcast on Prime and even topped the Bristol race on FS1. It also included the youngest audience yet for Prime and youngest audience for any Cup race since 2017. Also interesting to note that the 2.1 million viewers outpaced the 1.9 million viewers for the F1 race on ABC network television and the 1.012 million for IndyCar on Fox during prime time on Sunday night. And as I said last week, those numbers on Prime are likely to continue to increase in the coming years as has happened in the NFL. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, how streaming has officially taken the lead over cable and broadcast television. And now it's time for more numbers in our By the Numbers segment. We're going to start this week with our last 5 races analysis, and we have a change at the top. Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain have swapped positions. This week, the Joe Gibbs Racing driver is at the top with a strong last 5 races, including his bookends being a pair of runner-up results at Kansas and Mexico, which has him with an average finishing position of 7.6, or the exact same number of Chastain a week ago. This week, the number 1 driver has dropped to number 2 with an AFP of 10.4 and a pair of top 10 results, including his win at Charlotte. We have a tie for third with the Chases at 10.8. Chase Elliott moved up from 6th to 3rd with a pair of top 10s of his own, including finishing on the podium in Mexico, while Chase Briscoe is our biggest mover, jumping up 6 spots with 3 top 10s, including a solid 7th place on Sunday. Chris Buescher is 5th with an AFP of 11.2 and has 3 top 10s of his own. Rounding out the top 10 are William Byron, Ryan Preece, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, and looky there, SVG is 10th with his win south of the border. And finally, let's take a look at our race progression graphs from Mexico. And we'll start with SVG and the top 5 finishers. And you can see the number 88 car was strong all day long, starting on the pole and only dropping out of the top 5 on the first stage break and on a pit strategy call. Christopher Bell and Alex Bowman had strong days as well, both starting deep in the field and making their way forward. And look at Michael McDowell, started 5th and finished 5th. Now, let's take a look at Hendrick Motorsports, and you can see that crash on lap 8 with Kyle Busch ruined Kyle Larson's day. But the rest of the HMS crew had solid days, all finishing inside the top 10. Joe Gibbs Racing also had a strong day with 3 cars finishing inside the top 11. Gibbs had a strong car much of the day but faded late. And Ryan Truex, subbing for Denny Hamlin, it's fair to say struggled as he was pushed around by his fellow competitors. Let's next take a look at Penske and the Wood brothers, and you can see they struggled. Only Austin Cindric and Ryan Blaney ever found themselves running well inside the top 10, while Josh Berry and Joey Logano had rough days. Since we've talked about Carson Hocevar, let's take a look at his day, and it was an up and down day for the number 77 car, which finished with a 34th place result, while his teammate Justin Haley was caught up early in that crash with Kyle Busch on lap 8 and never recovered. And lastly, we'll take a look at the Trackhouse team. As we talked about, SVG got the win, but his teammates had up and down days of their own, both finishing in the teens. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. We hit on a lot of topics, and I want to get your thoughts. First, let's start with Carson Hocevar. Let me know what you thought about Spire's punishment, Hocevar's response to it, but before you comment, I seriously want you to think about when you were 22 and the things you said and did that you regretted. I know it's a long time ago for me, but I can certainly think of some instances. Sticking with Mexico, what did you think of Joey Logano's remarks about other drivers getting sick? And I haven't asked this before, but I'd like to know, for those of you who have gone to Mexico in the past, if you got sick like several drivers did and I did last September, or made it through without issue. I also want to hear what you thought of Richard Petty's remarks on road courses and the playoff format. Plus, let me know what you thought about the different polls on the playoff format that I talked about, and Mark Martin's comments about it not changing. And tell me what you thought about this week's TV ratings and how they increased over last week's numbers. And finally, let me know what you thought of this week's By the Numbers segment. As always, thanks again for checking out the latest episode and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.